Girls, even though Harry Potter is about a boy, you'll like it. So in the fall of 2015, the first book in the Kat Sinclair files came out. This was a paranormal middle grade trilogy that I wrote about a girl who doesn't believe in ghosts and her father is the host of a paranormal investigation show. I was on my way to teach a writing workshop and I decided to stop by the Barnes & Noble that was near the school. This was in Manhattan. I was hoping they'd let me sign the copies that they had so that they could put the cool little autographed sticker on it and maybe even give it a little face out placement on the shelf. So the bookseller that I talked to, I don't know the exact job titles at Barnes & Noble specifically, but she was like the manager of the children's section. She was a very nice woman who I would guess is probably in her 50s. And there was also a younger worker there, like college aged, and the three of us were chatting. And the bookseller, they had my books and they pulled out a big stack and we had them set on the table and I was signing each copy and they were slapping the little sticker on it. And the bookseller was like, well, tell me about your book so that I know who the target audience is and which kids maybe to recommend it to. And I gave her the pitch and she was like, oh, October's coming up, that's great. Maybe we'll use it in a spooky Halloween display or whatever, which is great. And then she's looking at the cover. So here's the cover. And she comments on, okay, so there's a girl and a boy on the cover. She asked something like, do they both get points of view? Like, is it both of their stories? And I was like, well, the girl is Kat. It's her name in the title and it's all her point of view. It's all first person point of view, Kat. But Oscar, the boy, that's her best friend and arguably the most important side character in the book, definitely the most present one. And she says, but it's not from his point of view. And I remember I was still signing. I wasn't looking at her at this point and I was like, it's kind of a weirdly specific question, but I said, no, it's not from his point of view. And she said, oh, okay, so there's no boy's point of view? And I was like, no. And she goes, oh, okay, because, boys don't read books about girls. I have this very clear memory of like stopping and looking up at the younger employee, the one who was just listening, and our eyes met and we had a conversation. And basically what she told me about her boss was, this is a soapbox she will not step off of. And I could hear it too in the bookseller's voice, the manager's voice. I could hear it wasn't just an offhanded, innocent comment. There was a challenge in it and she was looking at me too, kind of like she was daring me to contradict her. Like she kind of wanted to have this discussion, probably because it's an argument she's had before with other people and she's not going to let go of this belief. And if I hadn't been on my way to a workshop, it was starting in like 15 minutes. I might have taken that bait because this, like I said, this was the fall of 2015. And earlier that year, I think it was in February, Shannon Hale had posted a blog post that was about a gender segregated school visit that she did. And the story had been haunting me ever since. I've been doing school visits as part of my tour for Princess Academy, The Forgotten Sisters. All have been terrific, great kids, great librarians, but something happened at one I want to talk about. I'm not going to name the school or location because I don't think it's a problem with just one school. It's just one example of a much wider problem. This was a smallish school and I spoke to grades 3 through 8. It wasn't until I was partway into my presentation that I realized that the back rows of the older grades were all girls. Later, a teacher told me, the administration only gave permission to the middle school girls to leave class for your assembly. I have a boy student who is a huge fan of spirit animals. I got special permission for him to come, but he was too embarrassed. Because the administration had already shown that they believed my presentation would only be for girls? Yes, she said. I tried not to explode in front of the children. Let's be clear, I do not talk about girl stuff. I do not talk about body parts. I do not do a your menstrual cycle and you presentation. I talk about books and writing, reading, rejections, and moving through them, how to come up with story ideas. But because I'm a woman, because some of my books have pictures of girls on the cover, because some of my books have princess in the title, I'm stamped as for girls only. However, the male writers who have boys on their covers speak to the entire school. This has happened a few times before. I don't believe it has ever happened in an elementary school, just middle school or high school. I remember one middle school 2 to 3 years ago that I was going to visit while on tour. I heard in advance that they planned to pull the girls out of class for my assembly, but not the boys. I dealt with that in the past and didn't want to be part of perpetuating the myth that women only have things of interest to say to girls while men's voices are universally important. I told the publicist that this was something I wasn't comfortable with and to please ask them to invite the boys as well as the girls. I thought it was taken care of. When I got there, the administration told me with shrugs that they'd heard I didn't want a segregated audience, but that was just how it was going to be. Should I have refused? Embarrassed the bookstore? Let down the girls who had been looking forward to my visit? I did the presentation, but I felt sick to my stomach. Later, I asked what other authors had visited. They'd had a male writer. For his assembly, both boys and girls had been invited. I want to interject here and say that while this happened, this blog post was from early 2015 and the story she's telling was probably 2014 or earlier. And I know a lot of things have changed since then, especially in terms of just the general awareness of the lack of diversity in kidlit, and things are improving. But I also know for a fact that there are still plenty of adults, including teachers, librarians, etc., out there who would not have any problem with this story so far. Woman writer, story about princesses, girls only. And I really don't think most of them intend harm. It's just an assumption that they've never questioned. Boys don't want to read books about girls. If that sentence doesn't make you flinch, how about this? White kids don't want to read about black kids. Or straight kids don't want to read about gay kids. It's not just that these are cringy things to say, it's that they're not true. The message that representation in media and in books is important has gone mainstream, and that's great. But equally important, and something that I think gets lost sometimes, is the fact that readers also love reading stories about people whose experiences are entirely different from their own. And that specific parts of our identity aren't the only reason we relate to characters and their journeys resonate with us. We can identify with fictional characters for tons of reasons outside of their race, their gender, their sexuality, their religion. Also, I have to say, in terms of these school visits, if when I was a kid, I had found out that an author was visiting my school and doing a presentation about their books, and I was not allowed to go because of my gender, I would have been pissed. I think most people reading this will agree that leaving the boys behind is wrong. And yet, when giving books to boys, how often do we offer ones that have girls as protagonists? Princesses even. And if we do we qualify it? Even though it's about a girl, I think you'll like it. Even though. We're telling them subtly, if not explicitly, that books about girls aren't for them. Even if a boy would never ever like any book about any girl, highly unlikely, if we don't at least offer some, we're reinforcing the ideology. I've heard it 100 times with Hunger Games. Boys, even though this book is about a girl, you'll like it. Even though. I never heard a single time. Girls, even though Harry Potter is about a boy, you'll like it. The belief that boys won't like books with female protagonists, that they will refuse to read them, the shaming that happens from peers, parents, teachers, often right in front of me. When they do, the idea that girls should read about and understand boys, but that boys don't have to read about girls, that boys aren't expected to understand and empathize with the female population of the world, this belief directly leads to rape culture, to a culture that tells boys and men it doesn't matter how the girl feels, what she wants. You don't have to wonder. She is here to please you. She is here to do what you want. No one expects you to have to empathize with girls and women. As far as you need be concerned, they have no interior life. And here's something else that has always baffled me. There's this old-fashioned but still very prevalent idea that to men, women are mysterious creatures, our minds. I mean, who knows how they work? And if you feel that way as a dude, I don't know, maybe reading a few books by women about women would help you crack that code? I guess I'll just say this. Back when I was a very shy young girl who was interested in boys but absolutely terrified at the idea of dating them, I learned some stuff about boys through books. And I have to imagine that boys who are interested in girls but maybe not ready to take that step could learn some things if they read some books about girls too, and that they would want to learn those things. At this recent school visit, near the end, I left time for questions. Not one student had a question. In 12 years and 200 to 300 presentations, I've never had that happen. So I filled in the last 5 minutes reading them the first few chapters of The Princess in Black, showing them slides of the illustrations. By the way, I've never met a boy who didn't like this book. After the presentation, I signed books for the students who had pre-ordered my books, all girls, but one third-grade boy hung around. "Did you want to ask her a question?" a teacher asked. "Yes," he said nervously, "but not now. I'll wait till everyone is gone." Once the other students were gone, 3 adults still remained. He was clearly uncomfortable that we weren't alone, but his question was also clearly important to him. So he leaned forward and whispered in my ear, "Do you have a copy of the Black Princess book?" It broke my heart that he felt he had to whisper the question. He wanted to read the rest of the book so badly, and yet was so afraid of what others would think of him. If he read a girl book, a book about a princess, even a monster-fighting superhero ninja princess. He wasn't born ashamed, we made him ashamed. Ashamed to be interested in a book about a girl. About a princess, the most girly of girls. I wish I'd had a copy of The Princess in Black to give him right then. The bookstore told him that they were going to donate a copy to his library. I hope he's brave enough to check it out. I hope he keeps reading. I hope he changes his own story. I hope all of us can change this story. I'm really rooting for a happy ending. Okay, so I said earlier that at this time, as I'm standing there in Barnes & Noble with this bookseller and her challenging "boys don't read about girls" ringing through the air, and her stare like she's waiting for me to challenge her, and this post, this story is like going through my head, I was on my way to teach a workshop. This particular workshop, there were 6 kids and they were all boys. This was fall, like I said, and I had already had this workshop for the whole previous year when the boys were in 5th grade. Now they were at the start of 6th grade. And because I only had 15 minutes to get to class, I let this comment slide, something I still regret a little bit, and I finished signing my books and I got out there. And as I was walking to this class, I was thinking about what this woman had said, and I was thinking about the workshop I was going to and these boys that I had known for a year and watched them write and grow as kids and as writers, okay? And I was thinking about the kinds of stories that they were working on now. In this workshop, we had had a couple of sessions at the start of the fall already. Now, the previous year, when these boys were in 5th grade, they all wrote fantasy and superhero stories, universally, and it was great. But after just a few workshops this fall, I had already noticed a change in them. One of them, the previous year, had written these really hilarious, over-the-top superhero stories. They were great. He had come in after the summer break and very solemnly told me on our first workshop that he wanted to write a generational family saga. Another boy who had spent all of the previous year finishing an epic fantasy, and it was epic, it was a book, the thing was a tome, okay? He had decided over the summer, after some self-reflection, that he wanted to rewrite it from scratch because, and he figured all of this out on his own, this had nothing to do with me. It was all plot and world building, and he didn't have any emotional depth to his characters. So he was spending every workshop rewriting and adding all of these new scenes filled with so much angst and crying, so much crying, and love and loss, and giving these characters arcs. And guess what? 3 of these boys, 3 out of 6, that'd be half, were writing stories where the main character was a girl. And this wasn't even something I had really thought about until I was leaving the Barnes & Noble with this bookseller's words ringing in my ears. Because it wasn't notable to them, to the kids, or to me. I mean, boys read and write stories about dragons and dogs and warrior cats and robots. Why not girls? Imagine if, as their teacher, the way I had reacted when one of those boys had shared his story with the workshop. Imagine if what I had said was, "Why are you writing a story about a girl?" What would that have done to that kid and to the whole group? If a kid expresses shame about a book he wants to read, it's only because somewhere along the line, someone, probably an adult, shamed him. That's it for my story time, but I bet a lot of you out there have stories very similar to this one, and I would really love to read them in the comments below. So let me hear it, and I will see you guys later this week with another video.